Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. We have a big show today. It's our final show of the week, and we have a lot to cover. We're going to cover as much as we can heading into the weekend of the NBA and NHL playoffs. We're also going to talk some MLB news. Robo-umps are not coming in 2025. We'll talk about whether or not that's a good idea. And then the big news, the death of amateurism in the NCAA. We will talk about all of that and more coming up later on in this show, so stick around for that. But we're going to start off our show talking about the big games from last night that took place in the NBA. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. Appreciate all of you for tuning in and watching on a Friday afternoon, but we have a lot to cover. Once again, that link is on the screen right now, gsmcpodcast.net. But like I was saying, we are going to take a look, start off our show today, as we often do in these NBA playoffs, talking about the NBA game from last night, that being the Celtics versus the Pacers. The Celtics taking a 2-0 lead in this series behind a 40-point game from Jaylen Brown, along with a bunch of other things. And the main headline from this game is the Celtics have dominated, and Haliburton's injury is a bigger piece of this puzzle. Because if you were tuning in and watching this game, as much as the Celtics kind of controlled the pace of this game the entire way, the Pacers kept finding ways to get back into this game until Haliburton went out. I mean, even deep into that third quarter, there were times when the Celtics were going up by 13, going up by double-digit points. The Pacers, more often than not, were able to get it back in. They got it to within 2 at that second half. And then Tyrese Haliburton goes down. He's out for the rest of the game, and the Pacers don't have that juice. And I know losing your best player is a huge, huge loss for a team like the Pacers, but losing this game hurts even more, right? You now have a team that feels kind of lost, that should have won game one. They lose their star in Tyrese Haliburton, and then they lose this game by 16. And 16 might look like a blowout. It might look like this game wasn't close, but it was close for a lot of the time. They held Jason Tatum to almost nothing in that first half. They held, Jaylen Brown was going off. There's nothing they could do. He had a 25 point or so first half, and then he kept it going into the second, and he was unstoppable last night. So before I go too far, I want to give him all the props, all of his flowers, because he played an incredible game. 40 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, and he kept them in that game. He kept them going, even when Jason Tatum was struggling, which is exactly what they needed. This is the kind of game. This is the kind of reason that they held on to Jaylen Brown. In the last offseason, there were talks of the Celtics trading Jaylen Brown. It's expensive to have 2 supermax players on your roster. It's not something that's easy to build a team around, and yet they've found a way to do it, and you're seeing why it's so valuable to have 2 guys of that caliber. I was talking to a friend of mine. He was asking me who the best duo in the NBA left is, and to me, it's not really that big of a question that it's Tatum and Brown. He kind of looked at me sideways, saying, "What about Luka and Kyrie?" I think Luka's the best player left in the NBA right now in the conference finals. But if you take a look at the players when you're talking about a duo, you have to look at the best 2. And I think Tatum and Brown together, you saw it especially last night in that game too, when Tatum was really playing awful. Like, he goes through these stretches, especially in the playoffs, it seems, where he plays awful, but he is the guy, and then you see Jason Tatum be able to come in and hold the slack, keep that team alive, keep them into it. But how this loss reflects on a team like the Pacers as opposed to a team like the Celtics with this win is completely differently, obviously. If they had Haliburton, I think they keep this a close game. I think if Haliburton is able to play for that fourth quarter and that back half of the third quarter, unfortunately he leaves with that knee, with that lower leg injury, as they're calling it. But if he's able to play, I think this game is a single digit game at least. I think he makes up for at least 7 points in here, and we have to see how bad that injury is. He's obviously had injury troubles with his leg injury all season long. He had that hamstring injury that bothered him. And remember at the beginning of the season, he was in MVP conversations. He was leading this Pacers teams to new heights that they hadn't seen since the Paul George era. And I mean, he still has. He leads them to a conference final for the first time since Paul George. But you know, this Pacers squad without Tyrese Haliburton, we saw in that second half of that game, were unable to keep it together, and it is a shame. Hopefully, Tyrese Haliburton is able to keep playing, and that it's not a big deal because the Pacers can give the Celtics a fight, at least without Kristaps Porzingis down there, as we've seen in these first two games. Undoubtedly, they should have won game one, and they didn't, and they blew that. And after losing game two in the fashion that they've now lost game two, it is a brutal loss in game one, and it kind of takes all the wind out of their sails. Now, they have been a very good team at home in the playoffs. You don't have to look much further than round two against the Knicks. They fall down 2-0 just like they did in this series, and it was in pretty convincing fashion as well. They fall down 2-0. They win both games at home, go back to New York, and then they're able to take game 6 at home and game 7 in New York. So they did not lose a single game at home in their last series. That home court advantage has been awesome. I believe if you go back to the regular season, they've now won around 20 straight games in a row at home. They're somewhere around that mark. I'm curious to see how game 3 plays out. Now, in a series where you don't have your best player going against arguably the best team in basketball, definitely the best roster on paper in basketball, it is really, really tough. But the Pacers are a team that can go out and they can score 120 points with ease because they play with pace, and both of these teams play with pace. That's why we've seen these back-to-back high-scoring games for these two teams. And high scoring is a different level in the playoffs. Obviously, they play a little more physical, let more things go, so you're going to see a little bit of lower scoring games than we're used to in like the beginning of the regular season, where teams are putting up 155 points. But scoring 120 is pretty good. It's pretty good. And the Pacers and the Celtics both have the offensive capability to do that. So taking a look at the future of this series in particular, we'll take it down two roads, right? Road one, Tyrese Haliburton comes back and is able to play. It's not an injury that keeps him out, and he's able to be 100%. Now, that's important. Tyrese Haliburton strikes me as a guy that's going to want to be out here, even if he's not 100% in the conference finals. If he's there and he's 100%, the Pacers, I don't think they have a shot to win this series anymore. Going down 2-0 against a team like the Celtics is tough. Now, injury luck can happen. Maybe they can win this like they did against the Knicks when the Knicks got incredibly hurt. But that's never something you should or can count on. And it seems like it's the Pacers' turn to get hit with the injury bug with Haliburton going down here. If he's back 100%, I think they can take 1 or 2 games here at home and make it look like a series. I still don't think they're going to be able to pull it out. I just think this talent gap between the Pacers and the Celtics is too big. I mean, you go star for star. The Celtics win that matchup every single time. Other than maybe at center, and they're going to need some quality minutes from their bench guys. Without Haliburton, you're going to need some of their shooters to step up and shoot better. They're going to need Obi Toppin and T.J. McConnell to come off the bench and continue what they've been doing. They have both been huge parts of this playoff run, both of them off the bench, providing energy, and they've both been playing great, which has been a huge help for a team like the Pacers, who are kind of struggling a little bit, who would be struggling a lot without their energy off the bench. So we'll see how bad this injury is for Haliburton. If Haliburton is unable to keep going, and he can't play game 3, I don't know if the Pacers will win a game. I think that, I mean, we saw it really. This was a you can split this game up into the pre-Haliburton injury and the post-Haliburton injury, and the Celtics were doing their thing the whole time, but the Pacers just did not have the juice to come back after that Haliburton injury, and they were hanging tough before it. Like I said, they cut that lead to 2 in the third quarter, and then Haliburton goes down, and they're unable to mount any more comebacks, and you can see they kind of get demoralized there. Uh, they go back home. Like I said, they've been a great, great home team. I expect them to give them a bigger fight in Game 3, even without Haliburton. If Haliburton plays Game 3 and is 100%, I think they'll win that game. If he's not playing, I think it'll be close at least. So we'll see what happens over the weekend. Game 3 and Game 4, I would believe, would be on Monday. So keep an eye out for that. We'll keep you updated on that series as it continues to develop. But let me know what you think. Jaylen Brown went off, kept the Celtics alive and kicking. It was a close first quarter, and then they kind of just took control of the rest of that game, the Celtics did. But yeah, let me know what your thoughts are on the Celtics-Pacers series. In our next segment, we are going to talk a little bit about the settlement that went through in the NCAA. We talked a little bit about it earlier this week. We're going to go more in depth about what that means for the future of the NCAA, how the NCAA has built itself over the past 100 years, and how this completely shakes the foundation of the entire organization. So stick around for that. We'll be right back on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.